All right, so I think we've begun. Yeah. All right, folks. So we're going to discuss something here that of interest. You probably already recognize that based on what's put in the title of the video. So I would like to introduce to you Michael. He's going to say a couple things about himself, and then we're going to go ahead and begin.
Thanks, Randy. Well, look, I actually don't have a lot to say that's of particular interest about myself. I'm a pretty ordinary person. It's just developed a pretty deep interest in a lot of this content, probably because of a bunch of quite personal memories which have seemed to have unlocked in me. In any event, I've reached out to Randy to try to get to the bottom of, I guess, some of the more technical aspects of this information, and that's really what, for me at least, this is about. But I don't have a lot more to say about myself other than that.
Okay, well, thanks, Michael. I appreciate you being here, and I overall thank you for your friendship. So, we're gonna go over some questions. Michael put together a PDF of some questions that we thought it would be a good idea to discuss. So we're just going to go over one question at a time for each podcast. I think that would be much more appropriate and fitting. So we're going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and read through the first question, or Michael, if you want to, you can go ahead and read through the first question.
Sure. So first question is pretty simple. It's basically 25,500 years ago, something allegedly happened. Could you please explain what that was?
Yeah, this is in reference to the Neurubian diodic crystal grid. So what we're referring to here is the checkerboard mutation. And the checkerboard mutation is the result of the Shona Transpositional Fields that was created within this Eka around 25,500 BC. So there's going to be, just for the listener's sake here, I'm going to be using some 50-cent words. And so I'm going to back up on the response I just gave and explain some of this terminology. Okay, let's make it a little bit more simple. All right, so we're going to look at Eka. All right, just those two terms put together. Now, vecca is in reference to time vector. In other words, location based on the density and how time works within that field. Okay, Eka has to do with realm. Okay, as an example, if you look at like being in your house or you're in an apartment or whatever, and you have a hallway, right, going into a room, that hallway can also be called a corridor. Okay, so that corridor is going to open up into 4 other rooms. Okay, and that's what we're talking about being within a reality field, because one Ekasha corridor equals 4 Eka worlds. One of the 4 corridors of one Ekasha is a spectra of God worlds, or Vecca time vectors. Or see, it starts to get confusing because it starts to get all flowery in its language. So let's break this down. Again, emphasize, like being in your home, you have a hallway, think of that as being a corridor, because that's exactly what it is. And then it opens up into a room, which can open up into more rooms. Okay, so within these 4 worlds, these say 4 rooms that it opens up to, 4 Eka worlds, one of the 4 corridors is the Ekasha A spectra of God worlds. Okay, it's probably better to draw what this looks like, but think of like a cross like this, and you have a junction point right there in the middle, right? So you're going into a room, and then a room opens up into 4 rooms, and then it opens up into a bigger space that accompanies the entire reality field. Okay.
Yes.
That's basically what this is talking about. So this location here, Eka Vecca, which is the room that we're in, the density that we're in, and the way time works here. But time has been manipulated here in this world in the way that we perceive it. The particle spin rate is different within different areas of the planet. That is not a normal thing. That's not a natural currents, but that's the way it's perceived here as being normal. In other words, time zones. That's why I referred to these being as, within the video previous to this, as being God zones. This has been cordoned off specifically in order to keep track of the occupants within this world in order to utilize them to the uttermost benefit. So people here have been used like cattle. Okay, simple as that. Let me back. Well, I'm going to go ahead and finish if I can. I'm going to go back up. I'm going to continue back up with what I was referring to in regard to this checkerboard mutation. Why it's called the checkerboard mutation? It's being a result of these Shona transpositional fields. Okay, Shona transpositional fields, or Shona transpositional filter Dietrich. Okay, I'm going to make this really simple. I'm going to apologize for taking so long to explain this, but after I'm done, I think you'll get it. Okay, so what we have here is an altering of the static field through digital processing that has a specific arrangement of filter coefficients that is a measured quantity of non-living matter or waste matter. That is to say, a digital reconfiguration. It's reversing of the polarity using space-time, the space-time field of non-living matter that is conscious but is not animated, reshaping the geometric light structure and reversing the polarity, that is to say, the electromagnetic ratios. This alters the axiom line polarity and function of the particle and antiparticle systems of the particum and particule. Again, we're talking about conscious but not animated. This is the non-living matter that is being restructured. That is units of undifferentiated consciousness without form or sentient memory. Okay, a lot of big words there. But the idea is to think of this like a lump of clay, and it's being reshaped in order for the individual that has in mind for the creation that they have intended to be manifest. So the checkerboard mutation aspect is scalar mapping. It's taking and reconfiguring the hexagram into a square form. Okay, that's the way we can look at things from a cube perspective, and then you have with a cube within a cube, these squares that make up the entire cube square. Each one of those squares is a vector within the entirety of the quadrant of the cube. So you have that cube and then a cube and within it and a cube within it, and then it becomes expansive. So every single pixel, if you will, because it's much like a computer screen or TV screen, every single pixel is accounted for, and anything can be manifested within that little pixel. That small area. Again, it's like if you look at a computer screen or look at a TV screen, what you're doing is you're seeing a flash line sequence that's creating a particular shape based on pulsation. Like with seismatic, when you take like some milk or whatever and you put it on a surface that it can receive vibration, and you can think of that as the you can think of it as being the matter field, space-time field, and you put this substance on it and think of that as being the particle, say milk or whatever, sand, whatever, and you put vibration through it, and based on the type of vibration that you're putting through it, it creates a form. And literally that's what they're doing. They're reshaping the form, so your perception of what you're observing within this vessel, which is part of the hologram, or you're embracing this illusion as being normal until you start seeing some wacky stuff that we're now seeing, in the hour and where we're at. That's like, wow, that's too wacky. Why is that broom just sitting in the sky? Why is that plane not moving? And all these different things that everybody's observing. And this has to do with the illusion that we're in. It's not a simulation. It's not a simulation. Sorry, I'm kind of like on a roll. That always bothered me because it's not a simulation, because the manifest reality to begin with is a hologram. So like you can call it a simulation, but it's a purposeful, it's like going into a virtual reality program. You know what you're going into and why. But here, because of a lot of complications, mainly have to do with things shut off in regard to our consciousness bands, not being able to access information, we come into this thing blank slated. So our what we see is just accepted until it becomes so wacky to where it's like there's questions that flare up because it doesn't make any sense, especially if you were born like 60 years ago and you knew what you observed then and what perhaps what you're observing now is totally different from what that was back then. So you're in a hologram to begin with. That is the reason for that is to experience self differently. However, here it is a hologram within a hologram within a hologram. It is a field that has been isolated for a very particular system of control. And so to go back again to the first question, 25,500 BC, what happened? Well, that's going to be a follow-up for later in regard to the drama that took place that led to this taking place. But the technology is what's important to kind of understand why things are happening the way that they're and why we're observing certain things that we're observing at this point in time. Hopefully I didn't confuse that, but it sounded like I did. So I'm sorry. Go ahead, Michael. I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. No, that's all right. I mean, I suppose, well, one of the things you touched on a moment ago is the importance. I think you said the importance or the reality or the notion that people down here essentially willingly buy into the illusion. Perhaps you could expand on why that is important or not important, or the emphasis or on that.
Well, they do because you come into this blank slated. You don't have any access to your pre-existence. Therefore, you just accept things for where they are. Yeah. And then it's reaffirmed, or should I say, it's substantiated through the indoctrination and just simply fitting in here. If you if you complain too much, you get put in a white room with a white jacket.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying? So,
I mean, I guess what I'm getting at is, if we're dealing with or talking about sort of entities or energies that are vastly ahead on a timeline perspective and technology perspective, it would seem pretty reasonable that their capacity to compel people to do something is pretty obvious through just brute force. But then I guess it seems to me like we're getting towards something where it's like there's a deliberate effort to cause the receiver to willingly subjugate to the illusion. And I just thought that might have some particular importance energetically for how we all fit together, notwithstanding these fallen angelics they are still an aspect of source in any event.
Well, yeah, one of the complications we have here, if one subscribes to the particular record that is being the translations of the Klosher Torah plates, and that being this is the result of the fallen aspect of the morphogenic field of Tara when the cataclysm took place. What was it? It's been 560 million years ago. Is when I think was at the time when, I don't know if I had this correctly. I don't know if anybody has it correctly, but as I recall, this was during the time frame there and about when the angelic human races were beginning to be developed. And then once this transpired here, then the seedings had begun here. And so the result of that was fragmentation of soul.
Yes.
Okay. The life forces that you see here is all shared. And that includes the so-called heavenly bodies, okay? Because everything really is conscious, and as I mentioned before, some of it because of, well, without getting overcomplicated, and I've already done that, but when we're looking at the conscious but not animated matter, okay, which is units of undifferentiated consciousness without form, okay, or sentient memory. What we have going on here that remain conscious, and especially in regard to soul, is fragmentation. So what we share here is an overall consciousness. This is really the major complication, and this would also factor into why certain individuals would find themselves coming back here to reincarnate over again, not necessarily forced. See, there's a lot more to the story than what meets the eye, okay? There's a lot of ways to perceive this, and this is one of them, okay? So having to come back into here is for the reason of soul reintegration. See, this is what the sphere of Amente was designed for, or should I say was agreed to be facilitating, was the reassembly of soul reintegration. So when you express, here's the key factor that I come to understand, and it makes complete sense to me. Sometimes it's been extremely difficult, and it still remains the same in regard to myself because of fragmentation, and that is through my genuine expression. And this is really sometimes very difficult depending on what you go through down here. I mean, it's almost like a catch-22. Your idea is to reintegrate, but there's so much things conflicting with reintegration here. It creates more trauma and yada, yada, yada. You get the point. But when you're able to express your authentic self, your true authenticity, that's your soul signature. And so what happens when that's expressed is that the sphere, this is what the sphere of Amente is for, recognizes that and facilitates that and helps reintegrate that back to you. So ultimately that it's about defragmentation here, because again, to emphasize, everybody here is sharing a consciousness. It would explain why I mentioned what I mentioned earlier to you about the idea of being controlled by both sides of the coin. Malignant or not malignant, malicious and non-malicious. Because there's beings that are quote unquote the white hat good guys that are pushing people around like pawns, but that would help explain what I just said or facilitate what I just said. But there's a line for myself personally, which I don't want to go into at this point, where I draw the line on that.
In relation to, I remember reading in some of the Voyager's texts, they talk about like anti-particle codes that could not merge with the physical body building up in the etheric body. Is that related to this?
Well, the problem is that the distortions exist, so we need to define what distortions are. Distortion simply is that which is not of the natural order. End of story, really. So you have a configuration. If you have a design like a circuit, okay, think because this construct is very much, the whole entire construct is very much like a circuit. But if you don't have the pathways wired in the way that it was originally designed, it's not going to work according to that design. And this is what the problem that we have in these vessels. A lot of things have been shut off. We have from 9 to 12 strands of DNA totally removed, okay? And then from 1 to 8, we have fragmentation occurring. And I did a video, and I mentioned this last video that I did. I mentioned about this video that I did, why we manifest disharmoniously. And I break this down in that video, which I'll probably include the link to that. I guess I don't know where I'm at on the video here, but it'll be where it's supposed to be, where there will be a link for that for people to watch that and get the explanation behind that and why things don't work as they should. But it's in simplicity, it's about the structure is not able to function according to the original design because it's been altered, or so there's going to be where it's not going to be able to handle the codes. So let's think of the idea like, okay, if this is something that's confusing to a lot of people when you talk about portals and stargates, and portals and stargates are not the same thing. They're two different things entirely. What a portal is has to do with the density that you're in, and it will move horizontally or diagonally. But a stargate moves from density to density. In order to go from like this density here, which is the first harmonic universe, into the second harmonic universe, you have to hold the codes within your body in the vessel that you have in order to be able to move through it. Because I mentioned this before, I said this is not a numbering system, although it's been played out as being a numbering system. You can put numbers to the tones, but it's not that. It's a tonal system. The codes that I'm referring to are tones. If you can't hold that current within you, or it's not in your, it's being held, the Stargate won't recognize that and it won't open up for you. And if you try to force your way through it, you'll go to space dust. It'll just that's a safety mechanism, so not just anybody can go through. That's the reason. Here's the thing. This is the reason for the whole thing going down here on this planet in regard to why there is this controlling factor here. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why, but the main reason is for reversing the DNA in order to be able to facilitate to the codes to be able to move through the gate systems. Now, these are the beings that basically did what they did and destroyed shit last time, billions of years ago, and they want to do it again. So they're looking to facilitate so that they can do that, because there's a very specific structure and design to this that are, fail-safe type of things purposely because of what can occur within manifest reality. So that's really what they're looking to do and have been for a long time. And that's what with the hybrid program, really at the heart of it, that's what it is. And everybody here on this planet has reversed DNA. So that's the reason why when you go through bioregenesis, the whole point of that is to reverse the reverse. So it's like, for me, the way I look at it, I go, okay, it's like this is an instrument. I think of music because that's the way I see the whole construct. I see it as harmonic because, hello. So in looking at that, what it needs to be done, it needs to be repaired. The instrument has to repair, and then the instrument needs to be tuned so that it can play the song, which should give you access to all things. So is that easy? No, it is not.
This idea of there being a literal physical system to hold forms and structures within specific harmonic universes, and that I think I think I got you right in that the body itself simply doesn't hold if it's not trained or tuned into it the correct frequencies or codes to use the Stargate, the vertical system, vertical approach, so that would be like, how is that different to this idea of like theta frequency?
Let me kind of go back to the same analogy in regard to the circuit. Think of the circuit. Okay, here's the circuit according to a particular design that fits into the bigger part of the design. If that circuit doesn't facilitate by being able to junction with the other part of that circuit, it's not going to work. That's straight up. And that's really the case. So it needs to work according to the way that it's supposed to fit. And once it works according to supposed to fit, then there can be transmutation that occur. Then you can move from this into the next reality field. Without it, it's impossible.
So how is that different? Is that different, or is that the same to this idea of like a frequency fence or like a zeta type?
Well, frequency fence is part of the prison that's been created here, because the other aspect of that is not okay. Let me back up for a second and just say this: can we access our higher awareness and heal? I like to think of the word repair. Yes. but everything here is really set up so that you can't do that. So it's just facilitating keeping this place the way it is until the ones that are really in control of this gets their way. And again, their way is to be able to access the codes, to be able to move through the gate system, which means moving through into these other reality fields and not be stuck to this one that they're in. They can move around all over the place on the one that they're in, and they can do all the magic tricks, so to speak, but they can't move through the vertical gate systems because they don't have the codes. And this is again the reason for the hybrid program here, to facilitate the reverse DNA so that they can access some of the beings that come here that are, and trust me, they really look for the ones that are carrying all these codes. They want to use that because that's their key. And so that's the reason why you'll see certain people are been messed with from generation to generation more than others. Now, virtually everybody that I can think of has been taken, but most people just don't remember it. Only I didn't remember the stuff that took place earlier with me, but I did remember when it happened when I was in a waking state. I remember that one very, very clearly. But these things have been going on for a very, very long time. It's to facilitate that agenda. That's the heart of it. There's a lot of different factions and a lot of different things that are going on, but the heart of it is really that. Because if they can access if they can access the codes, that means they can access. Let me just back up and say this. What takes place? Let's describe going through a gate, what actually happens. Okay. There's a transmutation that's taking place. Yes, that is automatic as soon as you go through the gate. But before you go through the gate, what you're doing is activating your Merkaba vehicle. So when you activate the Merkaba, this is huge. When you're activating the Merkaba vehicle, what is it doing? First thing that it does, it regenerates you. Your sound and light bodies come together like this, like they fuse. They do that fusion fission thing that what you see within the particle and particum within the natural order, and it creates a perpetuation of life. In other words, you immediately move into a stage of eternal life. It's a huge thing. A lot of people don't really, I hear a lot of people talk about this in the past, not with what I'm saying, but talk about light body and not really truly understand what is being done. It's all mechanism. It's all part of the structural design in regard to the natural order. That's what I'm really talking about here, that perpetuates. But here's the thing behind that, okay? I don't know to the extent of how that transforms consciousness, or if at all. Does it transform consciousness? Well, I don't know that, and I can't begin to say nobody else does either. And I know that's really an arrogant thing to say, but there's some people would say because somebody else told them. I don't base things really on what other people tell me. Either I know or I don't. I don't like believing things, okay? But the long story short, if there is any, is that if you look at the first war in heaven, so to speak, okay, this is pretty high up. This is 11 plus dimensional consciousness, and it's still prevalent within those consciousness bands. Okay, and there's certain people out there that say, and I can name who they are. I'm not going to do that. I'm wanting to. I really would like to right now do that. Should I? Because I will. I'm refraining because I just don't want to piss anybody off. But they imply that if you're of a certain consciousness band, that you're not subject to that mindset, that you're within unity consciousness. And the first war it's not isolated here within the text that we have, okay, in different stories. It seems to be across the board for most of them anytime this is brought up, that this took place high up. The Lyran War, okay, was high up. That was at least the third harmonic universe. So we're talking about at least 9, okay, oversoul, okay? And then you have a movement into the fourth harmonic universe and blowing up the 12th Stargate, which holds the blueprint for regeneration under the natural order. And that's another story and goes in, I don't want to go into that. The point is that obviously there's a higher, it starts with a higher, in a higher state of consciousness. Why all those things happened, I don't know. I don't. I can speculate just like anybody else can. You know, I heard the idea of the manifest template was degraded based on a certain group, and they wouldn't do certain things, so they stayed with the template that they had. And because the degeneration or degrading of that template, it created distortion within their consciousness band, and it caused them to start behaving insanely. That's a possibility. You know, I can see the science behind that enough to say, well, I can see, but I don't know. That's just speculation on my part. Who knows? And plus, the extent of billions and billions and billions and billions of years, how can anybody here summarize what that is? So I don't know the full extent, but I do know, based on what I have had privy to and have seen from an early age and gone through and then seen like these different points of connection, but separate, about stories that relates to the very same thing that I became acquainted with in regard to the war in heaven, right? So this is high consciousness that's taking place. So no, just because you're a higher, you know, so-called more aware being and hold more of that conscious energy doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to be doing nefarious shit. Okay. So word to the wise, you know, it's important to be discerning, you know, not judgmental, preferably not judgmental. I've expressed my share of that, but more so just being discerning and understand. You'll know based on what you truly connect with. And that's going to be different for everybody. I'm not going to even want to go down that road, but
could you
there's more I want to say, but I could see that this is not a good thing for me to talk any further about. So I'm going to stop.
I just thought maybe you could expand a bit on the idea of the pentagram cube operating.
Yeah, it's just simply, that's just taking it and moving it into a different geometry. And that geometry that fits according to the overall the field in which they're controlling. Okay?
And so level
it could have been anything, but that's the geometry that's being used. I don't know exactly why, but it takes the hexagram and it changes it. That's the reason why I call it the cube technology. And you can see, if you take a hexagram, you can draw a two-dimensional hexagram, and then you can see within the center of it there's a square.
Yeah.
And that's basically what's going on. You can see that within Saturn. You can see it all over the place here. There's been things have been tweaked here. They've taken the field that you know, because there's been a lot of stuff that's gone down here and a lot of destruction that's happened, and it's left a lot of unanimated matter. And so they've been using that in order to shape things with.
What is the relevance of Saturn then in relation to this?
What's that?
What is the relevance of Saturn then in relation to all of this?
Oh, well, it's just like anything that we have within this field, which is the morphogenic part of the morphogenic field of Tara. There you have fallen consciousness, and fallen consciousness has, like everything, has an agenda and objective, if it's twisted or not twisted. And unfortunately, we have a whole lot of control, and those beings that have the momentum here are the ones, if the proof's in the pudding, so to speak, of the control that's here. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that we need to quit or give up or surrender or anything like that. It's just recognizing things for what it is, because it's been a very long-term controlling thing. And man, like I said before, we have so much history and so much drama, it's impossible to summarize any of it. I mean, any of it. When you tell one story and it may be true, And because it may be kind of kooky sounding, you get kind of written off as being kooky. But the truth is that it's so interlayered and so depth, and it interconnects with so many aspects of manifest incarnations. It's huge. So this reason why I kind of wanted to talk about what I did earlier about this sphere of a mente. And the reason why you're here is to take responsibility. Once you know this, at least try to take responsibility of reintegration, and knowing that your reintegration of your soul, fragmented soul, distortion, for your unique self to come together, your energy, your fragment energy, to bring it together so that you can move from this place to, and we're talking about also at the same time manifest reality. You are responsible for what you do, and you're responsible for your energy that's lost. Well, it's not lost, it's fragmented, but you're also responsible for it. But things are here, have been placed here, the sphere of mente, to assist you of reintegration. And again, let's make it simple. Let's make it simple. Please, God, let's make it simple. Your authenticity, finding truly what your authenticity is and expressing it. And usually the greatest way for it to be understood as the unique individuated aspect that you are is through the natural expression of joy and love. Now, I'm not talking about earthly joy and love, although it could be exhibited through that, but this unique aspect that from your core, that has no thought, it is just being. It's just that, and that which flows from you the easiest in that regard. Now, this should not be equated with the idea of discipline that you have here in this world, whether it's through vocation or learning a skill or anything. That's not what I'm talking about. Just want to be clear about that. It is through just that freedom of free flow, joy, and love. It's going to cause you to light up in regard to your signature, and then your signature, regardless of how distorted it may be, because that's actually a subject matter that I really would like to, not at this time, obviously, but in the future, talk about. Maybe we can talk about it next when we talk about more of the drama. But in regard to what has transpired here in respect to further fragmentation and thought form becoming a life form, which is also your energy. I'll just leave it at that. That's a huge subject, very deep, but again, to emphasize, some of us find ourselves coming back here again because of reintegration for the reassemblage of that fragmented energy. And when you're in manifest reality, hence this being manifest reality, there is a facilitation to help you when the authenticity is expressed in order to bring in and to heal and reintegrate that energy again to unto, I guess it reaches, I would imagine it would reach a certain point to where you wouldn't have to do that because now you've gone past the threshold and now it should be able to reassemble it a lot faster and that type of thing at the end. But again, I'm kind of being elusive here with what I'm saying, but I think you get the idea with what I'm talking about.
Sure. So that's a fragmentation between the emotional, mental, and astral bodies. Is that true?
It's just, in simplest terms, energy.
Energy. I was reading in some of the material, Voyager's material, this idea of Templar action seals and the removal of those seals through sort of like almost petitioning to some organization.
Yeah, well, we have within us the crystal seals, right? And crystal seals really act as diodes. Yeah, and so they allow energy to go. This is part of what I've been doing, and this is another video I'm trying to put together, which is like with what I did with the song that I did for memorization, for the tones and the colors associated with it. There's no better way to learn if it can be done through a song. And that's why I created the song for it. And I put it on the video so you could see the color and relationship with the tones and everything. Very, very relevant. The thing of it is that the next thing I lead to is like, okay, let's look at the schematic. Let's look at how these energy centers in regard to frequency and color is the same thing. Okay. And so you're able to see these seals, which are like, again, act as diodes. Now, when I do the video, I'll explain all this, but I don't want to go into that much depth at this point. But a diode only allows current to go one direction. All right.
Yeah.
So what they're talking about is these refractive seals that go in front of the crystal seals to refract the energy from flowing through it. So that's the reason why we don't have DNA strand 9 and 12 and so on forth, all these fragmentations, because there has the structure that we're talking about with the Shona transitional fields. The structure has been changed here, which changes the result in regard to manifest form here. So that's the reason why we have our navel here instead of up here, because this is according to the proper design for this divine spiral, which is a circulation aspect of our energy that goes back to the original point of blueprint, which is found within 12-dimensional consciousness. It's been moved. Now it's like it's down here. So it's total. So if it goes the wrong way. So, but within our energy body through bioregenesis, we can reshape that and bring it back into its order. But okay, you have to know you'd have to know your multidimensional anatomy for that. And that's what I've been doing here in preparation. It takes a long time for me to do things, especially the way things have been going here for me. Okay, so speaking of which, I'm going to go ahead and throw this in there because, folks, if anybody can help me financially this month, I'd be, indebted to. Well, great. I would have gratitude. I have virtually nothing coming in, and I had my hearing took place, and they found me unfavorable. Their decision, that is, in regards to my disability, that they didn't give it to me, so I was really depending on that. It took 4 months for them to come to this decision. And I'm just saying, I need to throw this in because this is in context. Everything I've been doing, I've been giving 100%, 110%, 120. I've been giving everything I have. And this is all I'm doing it by my lonesome. I have been. So everything I do and have been doing has been, in a lot of cases, I hate to say it, it's been sacrificial. I've been giving myself for it. So I need all the assistance and help that I can get. So I'm not, I'm not going to put forth false humility here. I need help. So if you can help me out, it'd be greatly appreciated for sure. Okay, so I'm doing what I'm doing with this, and I'm trying to figure out how to present the other aspect of the anatomy, which starts getting into more of the circuit design, if you will, so that people can memorize this stuff. So when they start doing start doing techniques and everything, I think it's so important to be able to know this before you do any techniques. Like we're going into the sound and light techniques, which I'm going to be doing, putting that together to be able to, guide people. Once they reach a certain point and how to do that, then they can start facilitating by their knowledge in regard to their anatomy and how it works. So when energy starts to really move, and it will move with the sound and light techniques, that your energy will begin to move through your vertical column. You'll feel it. It may take a little bit longer for some, but not as long as you may think, and certainly not as long it does for the other types of techniques, which seems to be separate from one another. Sound and light techniques brings it together where you have sound and light, and they merge together to create Manu energy, which allows you to move into a different space altogether. And long story short is that then within that empowered state of being, then you're able to visualize with strong intention. And if you're doing it correctly, which you will be doing it correctly, there is no, let me just rephrase that. Your concentration is singular. There is nothing that comes in and interferes with you. There's no flittering thoughts, nothing. You're so focused. so that when you start when you feel, especially when the energy starts moving, you'll know exactly where to move things and why. Because remember this, you are a God sentient being, and the Partikai is there at your beck and command. And you'll be able to command and move energy in that state with complete 100% intention.
Intention.
So important. That's the most important thing. So when you do, this is something that I know. It's not something I believe. This is something that I know. That when you get to 100% intention, that's when things happen, because that's when the crosses over, because it's a command at that point. That's what it really means to be a command, where there's no, it's not a yes, it's not like in between the yes and a no. Either it's this,
yes,
100%. And when that happens, your energy is so focused in this state.
Yep.
To when you command within that state, that's when things take place, and transmutation can happen quickly. The other thing I might wanted to add to this, and I'll be done with it, is that within sound and light techniques, you are the captain of the helm. You can stop anytime you wish. It follows all the structural aspects, you may, if you will, of bioregenesis in regard to doing things in a very balanced way, opposed to when people like have the Kundalini experience and they don't expect it to happen. It almost kills them. In some cases, it can kill you. It can. You ever heard of spontaneous combustion? Well, there you go. That's what happens. And what that does is shatters your crystalline structure on a holographic level. And your consciousness goes, that is dangerous, my friend. So dangerous, because you're starting all over now.
Yeah.
That sucks. So doing this is slow, but it's powerful. But when it's done correctly, and I'm going to put together, and Michael's going to help me with it as far as being able to present it and so on and so forth. I'm sorry, Mike, but I thought it would be a good idea to start talking about this right now for some reason.
I just have one point I'd like to add in terms of intention. It's powerful to say the word, and everyone at least intuits that they think they know what it means. However, I just wanted to say this. I mean, we live in an era that's really quite schizophrenic in terms of capacity to hold an intention or hold a thought even. And so perhaps with your course or the way you're thinking, it might be really advantageous or helpful, at least, to attempt to put a bit of structure around a specific intention. So, it's one thing to say, I intend for this, but how we actually arrive at having and holding a clear intention. Do we start off with a color? Do we start off with a sound? Do we start off with an idea? Am I thinking about love? And what is love? Is it a picture of my mother? Or, what is that to actually create that energetic
in this case, we're sound and light techniques is exactly what it is. It's sound and light. It's bringing unifying sound and light together in a meditative way that is where you're participating in it. So you're multitasking as you're doing it. It's not complicated, but because of the method and what you're doing and the engagement, it becomes fully engaged. And nothing else can enter in your space. And it's really not about it's not thinking about anything. It's just going through the process. And because this is something that I experienced at least 2 times that I remember. There's 2 distinct times that I remember this experience. One when I was 17 and one when I was 32, just before I was bedridden. For the first time. 17, I was in an out-of-body state, but yet still in the body. And when I was in this state, it was like there was no thoughts. And it was normal not to think. There was no traffic. There was nothing. And anything that I did, my intention was, when I did something, it was singular. It was just in that moment, and it was singular, and it didn't exert very much energy. And everything was perfect. And I remember reliving this to a certain extent about a couple of years ago. And I recalled that it would have been perfect for me to be in that state forever.
Mm.
I didn't need to do anything. That was perfect. And it was, because what that was that I was experiencing was true self. See, I wouldn't be here, Michael, if I didn't have some of the experiences that I did, that I have here recently have forgotten.
Mm.
I mean, that runs pretty deep with me. And now that I'm talking about it, I'm reminded of it and assured. But it's being in a state like with what I'm talking about here with this, where you're not really thinking. You think before you begin the process, but once you reach a certain stage, you're just, it's hard for me to put it in words what's going on, but you're in a certain state of being.
Mm.
And I referred to as taking sound and light coming together and merging like this truly. And then when it does, it goes menu, for lack of terms, which is just this holy sanctified space, which has nothing to do with feeling or thinking.
Mm.
Some people refer to this as samadhi, but this is a awakened state, and you have complete control of your faculties. In fact, when I was doing the sound light techniques and I was doing videos and I was in front of the camera and I started to do it for the very first time, I had that energy moving through me, and I stopped, and I was so taken back by that, what was going on inside me. And this was happening live in front of the camera. And
Mm.
I stopped it. I wish I didn't stop it.
Mm.
But I was talking while all this was happening. You see what I'm talking about? You're in this state of being where you're aware of everything. You're in control of all your faculties and your decision making. You're not getting taken over or any of that nonsense. And nothing's doing it to you. You are the captain of the helm.
So in terms
And
of,
that's, I thought this is the most liberating thing that I ever experienced, because those other things that I had happen weren't things that I did.
mm,
I didn't do to make that happen. They just happened to me. How about it? Isn't it nice to be able to do it, make it happen for yourself consciously? And
yeah,
that's true freedom. And that's the true freedom that we really do have, just haven't had it here,
so,
but
so,
you can. I know
so
you can.
in terms of altering or improving or tuning or refining or healing or whatever word you want to use, the system, if you borrow your views in terms of it being, electrical system, for example. So would you say that when you're doing that, then perhaps you are overriding or sort of going beyond or looking past or something that pentagram cube sort of Naburian diodic crystal
Yeah,
structure?
well, yeah, first of all, you're a God sentient being, so that which is normal is that you're functioning on that level. And when you connect to that, it doesn't take much. Again, let's go back to this being a circuit, because this is important.
Mm.
So I mentioned to you about a certain technique that you have to learn before you can do any of this, what I called it's used in chelantic, this term is used in chelantic science. However, I did not hear it being used. I'm not well schooled in chelantic science, believe it or not. I'm just not. So I came up with this term because it had to do with resonation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so harmonically resonating within the body, or you're vibrating and being able to move the vibration. But here's the key.
Mm.
Let's go back to the word circuit. You have to take the ground wire and ground it to this planet.
Mm. Okay.
So your lowest point in your body, which is your first consciousness band, is where you're going to experience that vibration. And that is referred to as being called chi. So your lowest extremity, that is your tailbone, your anus, very sensitive spot. You learn how to do the vibration in your head, and then you move it down into those lower extremities. Now, because my voice is different than yours, certain men's voices are lower, certain women's voices are higher. Going through explaining how this is going to work and be applied will be done in the videos for each of these ranges, okay? But the bottom line simply is you have to ground yourself. Because if you don't ground yourself, you can't pull anything in, because people keep thinking about pulling things in. No, 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 no. You got to ground yourself in order for current to flow. And there's a right way to do that. And then there's a wrong way to do things. A lot of what's going on, without going into that mess, there's a lot of stuff, people pulling things in, and it has really nothing to do with them, especially channeling so-called angelic hosts and stuff like that.
So let's get back to that point.
Again, captain of the helm. So there's nobody doing anything except for you.
Well,
which is really, really important.
Yeah, and I think you've used the language before. It's the command key, or the override sort of.
You're sovereign. That's when you start working through your sense of sovereignty, and it's not a mental thing. It's just a state of being.
State of being. So the grounding would be the essential first step.
Yeah, and so that's where the harmonic resonation technique comes into play, learning how to do that. Once you learn how to do that, and this is not singing. None of this is singing. It's vibrating, but it's moving. And what, without going into any depth here about it, I don't want to do that here, because that's something that's going to be in regard to presenting the courses and stuff that I'm going to put together. But
that's what I'm.
So it's really based on that allows you to take the old sort of, if you want to get an image in their mind, that enables you to take the wire and plug it in.
Sure. Well, just getting back to the central theme, I guess, of this conversation, which is all about, what happened 2,500 odd years ago, in sort of a technical manner.
This is all in context, really.
Yeah. So the hologram within the hologram, for example, that manipulation of whatever that hologram is that we're sort of experiencing, how is that sort of held in place? Like, how does it continue to perpetuate itself, I guess?
Well, you asked about the idea, what does a lens for, and what does a lens, how does it facilitate?
Right.
Yeah. It's the same type of thing. It's like, I'll give another analogy in regard to a lens, because it's very relevant. Because it's basically the same thing. If you look at a prism and how you can take white light and run light through it, then through the prism you can able to disperse the color that which is consciousness bands, through frequency displays itself. Okay. Well, you can take other lenses and reshape things to conform it. You can change the shape. You can obviously, like if you like a camera lens or something, or even a mirror, because we can think of a mirror as being a lens. And so you can take a mirror that's oval shaped, and you look into it and your head's all funny, or you go to a carnival, whatever. It takes and reshapes the configuration, right, based on observation. So the same type of thing, you can take that within the perception and how things work, because everything, again, let's not miss this. This is a hologram, okay? So when there's a reconfiguration, that's what this has done, okay? And when we're talking about, it's a digital reconfiguration, reversing the polarity. So in reversing the polarity, this affects all living, so-called all forms, and living, that which is living, consciousness living within it, and its perception and how it functions. It's reforming, reconfiguring it. So this is what it does. So it not only taking the non-conscious matter fields and reforming it like clay, and reshaping it through various frequencies, but also, because this is a holographic construct, it takes it a step further in regards to the how it can be manipulated. So you mentioned earlier about the idea of putting in refractive units that keeps the star crystal seals from working as a conduit unit or pulling frequency through. They block it, so it reflects the energy or light and makes it go the other direction. Right.
Yes.
So the ultimate result of what that is and what it's doing, well, not the ultimate, but the obvious result of that, it creates distortion. Because I gave the analogy before several times. If you think of a stream, and a stream's going downhill, right? And then you take a log and you throw it in the stream, and then what does it do? Either, depending on the amount of current that's flowing, and we can't have a huge amount of current flowing through this. So let's just say it's just a small stream. And so within that small stream, it's going to go around the log to the point of least resistance. And that's exactly what we have going here. Because if you look at the torus field is where you see the what is referred to within chelantic science as being the Hara line. That's really the center. Anytime when you're looking at, like when I put these charts together, because I redid the whole thing, when you look at the charts, you see this line, and that the focus is really on the line. The line is the torus field, the center of the torus field, okay? The Hara line, that's the center of the torus field. So if you don't, it goes to where it's like, okay, it hits here, and because this is the mental, and say this, look here, this is say, that's, it's not where it's located, but let's just say here's the mental right here, because we're, we think, where the mind's at, or where the brain's at, it's just, well,
sure.
It's just the hardware, but this, okay, so we look at the hardware here, we look at here within the stomach around here, let's say, okay, that's emotional. That's not where it's at, but let's just say that, okay? So we can get a picture and look at like this field going around us, right? And so if it can't go through, what is it going to do? It's going to bounce off and go back around.
Yeah.
And so it's like the log that's in the middle of the stream. So it's going to go to the point of least resistance. Where is it going to go? It's going to go to ground. It's going to go to chi. But you didn't clear this. So mental and emotional disease here is rampant because of this. So these are the primary distortions that are occurring here. But that's not only the obviously there's more causal effect going on, okay? Such as not being able to access, not only not being able to clear, but not being able to access, and thinking that, this is your first rodeo and the whole 9 yards. Everything that's related to here is an opposition to who you are outside of these fields. Complete antithesis. This has been manipulated specifically for the aspect of control for the overall, what I would refer to as being the chief agenda, which is DNA reversal, for the purpose so that they can access codes to be able to go through the gates vertically, because they can go anywhere they want horizontally and diagonally within the same field, maybe even into the next field through back doors, but only into the fourth expanse, which would be fourth dimensional consciousness.
So how is that? I mean, I've been reading a little bit about the idea of quanta, so the harvesting of quanta.
Quanta is just energy, and this is in regard to what I'm talking about in fragmentation. We have a lot of fragmentation, and this is, I wanted to save this, but I'll go ahead and mention that. Like if you go through a traumatic scenario, which it's a lot of people do, and you say you live for 65 years, okay? And so you had this traumatic occurrence that took place when you were 20 years old, okay? Something that's really horrific that just threw you and really messed you up for a long time, and you carried it for your entire life. And everybody here is telling you, well, you got to go to a psychologist, you got to talk to somebody about this, blah, blah, blah. Here you need to take drugs, all these other things that go along with it, which is a bunch of horse shit. What's happened is that you have a fragmentation of your energy within your body, that you've created a thought form that potentially becomes a life form if it's still fed. Okay. When you feed that, and what you're doing is, it's like you're taking a part of yourself and making, this is me, but I'm going to make me, it's your Frankenstein, okay? Yeah. So in creating your Frankenstein that you're not aware that you're creating, because you don't know how things work here, because you're deaf and dumb and blind kids here, all of us, especially first time coming in here. Long story short is that when you leave this vessel, part of your energy breaks off. And that part, which was the traumatized part, that if left unchecked and you go talk about it and you keep feeding that the same energy and reliving that over and over again, it turns into this life form that breaks off from you because it can't go with the rest of you that's going, because it's now your energy. It belongs to you, but now here it is. It's earth, sort of earthbound in this part of the realm, you know. And so a lot of what people see here, and they see these dark entities, what people don't seem to realize is a lot of this is us. Okay. And they're not demons. There's a difference between what someone would refer to as a demon, and that's an embodied conscious. That starts. I don't want to go down that road. I'll stay on track with this because that just starts getting too heavy. Long story short is that needs to be reintegrated, the energy. So when that is wandering around, what is it looking for? First of all, it's looking to survive. Why? That's the initial guide for all life, to survive, especially in these realms. So what is it going to do? It's going to look for the very energy that created it, which is what? Trauma. So when it comes, it ends in a room. Oh, it feels spooky, and that thing doesn't know anything else. Those are the things that need to be reintegrated, healed, and brought back in. And it's important to try to be able to do that while you're here. I know I have a lot of it because I've been I don't know if anybody noticed by now, but I've been in this field for a long time. I carry a lot of shit. Okay. And so this is the reason why I know a lot of this stuff. I know it's the internet age and everybody thinks everybody gets everything from the internet. I don't. Okay. And I'm old enough where I can say that, you know, and people believe me. I don't care, none of my business, but I do know how things work on a lot of areas and what is required. And it's not so easy. Oh no. In fact, it's not easy at all. In fact, it's extremely difficult. It has been for me and continues to be so, you know, so just saying.
Maybe in relation to getting back to this Nibirian dyadic crystal grid and this idea of ethos and eros, the sound and light bodies, how how are they fitting together in this distorted state, I suppose? Is that
well, obviously none of that stuff's working because it's not the natural order is for it to for fusion fission to take place. You know, the light body and the sound body, which everything within manifest reality can be understood within the encryption of the particle. It's really it's the simplest thing, it's the most simplest thing that has extreme function, but the heart of its function is simple. Here's the thing, that's not working now, is it? No, of course not. What do you see? Well, I see graveyards. I see everything consuming one another. I see finite energy. I see entropy. So what does that tell you? This is a fallen field. The natural order is not functioning here. There's no question about that. So it can't work until it's repaired. And all we can do is what we know to do and what we know to do it. And, you know, if we expect, here's the thing, if we expect somebody, I'm just going to throw this out there because it's not like nobody's heard this before, but I need to just to repeat it. If we expect somebody to come along and fix it, or if we expect to ride on the back of Mama Earth unto some better state of being, I think people's understanding of a free will is completely lost, because that's not how it works. It has to be an individuated choice. That's what free will is, regardless of the circumstances. Being in this space that we're in regard to this incarnation, if we understand it or not, we're still responsible for whatever happens, even if we are ignorant of the occurrence or ignorant of us signing up or agreeing to a contract. We're still responsible for it, nevertheless, because it's just the way this structure works. It's how the design works across the board, being in manifest reality wherever you're at.
Well,
Not only here, it's just a lot harder here. Okay,
I think
because
dominant theme there, Andy, in what you're saying. And I think if I was going to summarize it in a cute sort of fashion, it would be intention is the master code, and it's better to strive forward with intention than wait around for someone that can walk on water.
yeah, well, yeah, I mean, you know, the idea about sovereignty is usually when you finally reach that place, you find yourself metaphorically or almost literally standing in the middle of the desert, butt naked, with the sand blowing around your feet.
Okay.
So that should paint a picture of like you're the ones that you got to do what you're the ones. What are you going to do? Are you going to be clever enough to know how to get out?
I just want to go back a little bit to this idea of sort of
it's
this idea.
Not, just so everybody knows, it's not like they don't, but it's going to it bears repeating. None of this is easy.
No, I just want to go back to this idea of like soul harvesting, or the collection of quanta, the collection of energy, or why it's advantageous to keep us in this sort of state. I'm just wanting to get.
Well, when you're in a fallen state, when there's no regeneration.
No regeneration. Yes.
You have to work with the energy that's available, so everything's up for grabs. And so that's so how do you, okay, I just talked about the idea of fragmentation and talking about parts of you being created from thought form into life form and all these things. All this energy is, whatever it is being facilitated. So it's being used and it's being promoted or instigated to occur more so it can continue.
Yes.
The battery can continue to be charged.
Yes.
You know, like the idea of loosh. I've heard people talk about that. Well, loosh is just simply energy that's being transferred. It doesn't have to be fear, although it can be. In some cases, in fear, it can be quite powerful. But it also can be in love. It can be in bliss. It can be within any emotion, and especially if it's a collective thing, when it's an euphoric experience that people can have. And then you can have holographic insert projection, where you can like broadband a crowd and hit them with a certain emotion that pulses their base DNA and makes them feel a certain thing or experience a certain thing, which then produces a certain emotional response that turns into transferal of energy.
Okay.
So
does that mean that
quanta is based on how much you can hold your own energy within a reality field without being regenerated, and that doesn't last that long. It lasts pretty long, okay, but it diminishes and diminishes and diminishes. That's eventually to the point where your consciousness can't hold a form here, and that's when space dust happens.
And that's being reduced or bled off each reincarnation cycle. Is that a true statement?
It depends on how much. Well, it factors into what one experiences from lifetime to lifetime. It's hard to say. I mean, because there's a lot of variables with that. But ultimately, if somebody, let's look at worst case scenario. What if somebody? I'll just paint a picture here. It may seem fanciful, but it's a true illustration. Let's say somebody, let's say somebody had fought a bear 20,000 years ago. Okay, and they killed the bear, and the bear killed them, and then those energies merged and they become one. And then they reincarnate, okay? And each time that happened, because now we have a merging of soul, because believe it or not, other life forms, and I know certain people would say that they're robotic and all this other stuff, and I'm going, no, I don't see that. Because when you first start off in manifest reality, you're like the most smallest thing that you can think of, which is basically particle, okay? So it takes quite a while for things. That starts going down the wrong track here. But let me just say this. Take that in consideration. So you have moving through these 10,000 years goes by. There's a lot of trauma that's occurring because of this merging of souls. All right. being a bear and this other person. They're constantly reincarnating again one another, trying to resolve this.
Yeah.
So there's a whole lot of quantum being utilized in this process.
Yes.
Okay. And it's creating more trauma as it continues to go in and out in regard to manifestation as far as incarnation, to the point eventually where, let's say 20,000 years, we have this incarnation, and all of a sudden this person starts to sprout hair on them like a bear. And it starts to manifest now after 20,000 years, it starts to manifest. How much quantum has been used up, and why is it doing, what is it doing when that's happening? Is it now that the bear's taking over, or is it going to the point of least resistance and going back in a de-evolutionary fashion instead of moving forward because energy didn't prevail to allow it to move forward? It varies. So you can't, I would say one can't really say this or that. It has to be according to circumstance and condition, but it's fair to say none of this shit's normal. And this is really difficult to deal with. And some people simply get lost here. And I refer to the idea of spontaneous combustion. That's space dust.
Do you think
that means consciousness has been crystallized, shattered. They don't remember shit.
This quanta or energy that is over time becoming depleted if it's not.
If you're stuck in the field over and over again, you can't get out. Absolutely.
Yeah. So do you think, is that energy shared within like a soul family or soul matrix, or is it?
No, because we got to go back to the idea of fragmentation, because there's nobody that's been here for any length of time that hasn't gone through trauma that still carries that stuff. And the reason why you keep coming back here, or can, for one of the reasons for coming back here, and why you may hear through like NDEs or even people dying or maybe just getting out of the body, and some of these things are like vaguely explained to them in a way, not clearly, but letting them know that they have to go back. It's not necessarily because they're forcing them back. They just have to go back because they need to reintegrate their energy. And I haven't heard any case where they've told them this, but from what I can see and what I've experienced, this is certainly, and just what I observe and what I know about being here and what this is, certainly this is part of the case, if not one of the major reasons for actually coming back here, is to resolve things through reintegration. And for reintegration, there's also this process of re-imprinting your story. So it's like re-imprinting, like for those who are listening, like if you record something on tape, what tape is in essence is crushed rocks. And so it's able to receive the electromagnetic imprint from the sound, the magnetic imprint through electro expansion onto the tape, which gives you the recording. That's what karma is. It's recording. So the idea, because this has been recorded, now we have to resolve that issue. And if you don't know what the issue is, like you come here, you don't remember anything, you feel all these things, but you don't know what to do with it. And there's virtually nobody here to tell you what that is, because they don't know anything either. This has been like I said, I use the expression catch-22 because this is really hard. All this shit's really hard, but when you know to do what you know to do, endeavor, be persistent, and try to encourage one another and try to be of service, and let me say this while I'm saying that. The littlest thing that you may do may be a huge thing to somebody else. So always take that in consideration, because I know what it's like to be at breaking points, to wanting to commit suicide, and just where everything's gone. And the littlest thing will bring you out of it. It can, but it has to be the right little thing. So remember with what Michael just said in talking about intention. So important that your intention let it be pure, because who you are truly as a soul expression, untethered, not messed with, is very childlike, not naive. You know everything, but abundant with love and care, unrestricted, unconditional. So those little things matter.
Yeah, no. I think we've spoken about the analogy of a trim tab a little while ago. The idea of a small but deliberate, intentional bit of force which has an enormous upstream consequence. Can I just ask you a little bit about this idea? I know you've probably already touched on it, but just from my own mind, some of the reading that I've done in the Voyager's books is this idea of Templar seal bearers. Are you able to do?
Well, I guess it would be in the title. Temporal seal, temporal. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, so we're talking about time seal bearers, meaning they have the ability to open up. I've run into a couple people like this that had the ability. They usually work with off-worlders, and they manifest themselves present around them and instruct them, and then that person themselves don't really do it. Is they are doing it through them as being a medium connect. Not. Let me rephrase that. I don't like using that word medium because it starts conjuring up images and for definitions in people's minds. They facilitate through what they're being instructed to do, and actually the beings is the ones that's doing the work because they can go in and they can manipulate the energy field, where we can't really do that very well here. I mean, I've experienced that personally where I've been able to do certain things, but it's because of what was happening around me or within my field, not in me necessarily, if that makes any sense.
Sure.
So I think that's what's in reference to that. So if they can go in, they can see that you can see what's going on in the field, and they can say, okay, this doesn't belong there, and they'll take that out, and obstruct the current flow and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I have an upstream.
I think that's what that means. That's the way I would interpret that, just based on what you said.
Radio, and then if I understood you correctly, that would mean then that sometimes these people are sort of in different states in perhaps different octaves or different worlds completely, where they're actually assisting on something.
You wouldn't be able to see them. I mean, if I have somebody was working with me, like I've had, I didn't see them, but I could feel what was going on. And like I would have, and I had at one particular time, someone's healed of cancer. I had this energy field around me that was white. I was definitely within 12th dimensional energy, and I can look back and say that now, but at the time I could barely move or even say anything. I was just being like a conduit, so to speak, to facilitate the need of what was taking place. And, so, and I'm sure there were, certain beings there, but that was like the last thing that I would be thinking of at that time. And I wasn't thinking of anything like that. So either you can see, or sometimes you don't need to, or whatever. Either way, you're working. You kind of put it this way. You've agreed to do it at one point before you knew being here.
Yes.
And the other aspect of it would be that you're available.
Yeah, available.
That's a huge thing, is where you become a conduit. And at that stage where I was there, I was very, very much pure of heart. And I was sanctified. That's a huge thing. I was pure of heart and I was sanctified. So I was like and this was like 1 year before I was bedridden. So that's interesting. So people would say, oh, how come you're not healed? And why do you do? Listen, folks, you know what you know when you know it. Don't ever assume that you understand something that you have no understanding about it, or come to a judgment call based on things that other people have told you or what you think things are. Either you know or you don't. Like I said, this was 1 year away from me being bedridden at 33, and I'm experiencing these things, and other people were getting healed through me. So don't think anything. When you know, you know. So just leave that a big open door, okay? Just need to say that because people come to assessment and judgment on things that they want things. I'll just say this again because this is important. I run into a lot of people that want things, but they haven't even spent the time with it to come to any conclusion for themselves, but they want all the answers. You're not going to get it, because even if you got the answers, you wouldn't know what to do with it. You have to have time, you have to be able to create discernment, and you have to be able to process what you've experienced before you know very much about it. It took me many, many years to come to know what I experienced.
Getting back again to this this idea of, you know, Templar seal bearers, and I guess this idea of quanta, and perhaps it's something to do perhaps with the Nadiel sac, or this sort of literal sac of energy which people are apparently.
Well, that's your auric field.
Auric field. That's your auric field.
Yeah, again, auric field, you can think of your torus field. It's the same thing.
Yes. Okay. Right. And so that field may be shared somehow between.
Well, again, let's go back to the reason if one subscribes to the historical depiction that you find within the Cloister Dora Torah, plate translations in respect to Tara and the catastrophe that took place and the implosion took place there, and the part of the matter field went into the sun, sucked to the sun, pulled down here, downstepped, came here. The morphogenic field from that is what we see here. So all the consciousness, soul, fragmentation, everything came in here. So we're all sharing a consciousness.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what's going on. That's really what's here. And again, to emphasize, when we look at the sphere of Amente, the sphere of Amente was created as soon as that took place. The fall of man. That's reference to why it's called the fall of man. That's what Keylontic science, at least the title it was given for it, calling it the fall of man. Okay, so whatever. The point is that as soon as that took place within the primal sound fields, the Ra Confederacy, which is the group that you see, there's. Wow, I'm going to get in, start talking about the.
Who are the Ra Confederacy?
Primal sound fields? But long story short, that's our first entry point into this consciousness field, meaning this particular source consciousness field is where you first begin, is that you begin within the primal sound fields. And the primal light fields is an inversion of the primal sound fields, which is still us. And then from us, which is known as the founders, which is us, becomes expanded into now a subdivision of soul, what is referred to what soul is a station of identity. So these have different names based on the different density or reality field that expansion takes place, or that subdivision of the soul takes place. So long story short is that here where we're looking to reassemble our fragmented consciousness and energy, as was talked about before, you go to trauma, going through this trauma and things that can happen from creating a thought form, and the thought form over a period of time, depending on how much energy is supplied to it, and it's never restored or healed under these conditions, yada, 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 yada. You have a aspect of yourself that breaks off from when you leave this vessel, when it expires, and you go and reintegrate, heal enough to come back into this. You don't go all the way back. I don't know if that's changed. I think that's probably changed at this point, but there was a point where that wasn't. You just got and came right back. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but the main reason I would assume would be what I'm talking about here, and that's reintegration of energy. And you're talking about quanta and all this stuff. We're talking about your original energy that you had when you were on Tara. Okay? Was fragmented. You got blowed up. And so it was because of the disbursement and it downstepping, it started all over again. I remember certain points of being within this field. I remember when I was bedridden the first time, I re-experienced the idea of being on Meldeck and that blowing up. A lot of stuff. I've been able to recover a bit of it. At least become much more aware and clear about what things were and why, enough to where some of it I care and some of it I don't care. But I do know that that's if one understands this and takes and subscribes to this as part of history, which, by the way, has been verified through extra sources. And one of these sources refer to that particular book, Voyagers 2, as being the most
Accurate.
the most I'm trying to choose my words correctly here.
Accurate.
It was the truest book that exists here on Earth in regard to the history. Okay, and this is through another source, independent, completely. Yeah, that's a story in itself. But anyhow, get back to the quanta, get back to the fragmentation, get back to the reintegration, which we keep coming back to. And I think I answered it, but apparently I haven't.
No, you've done.
Long story short is that is the reason for coming back here, is to reintegrate that energy, and that through authenticity. So I'm looking for solutions. I don't care about history as much as I'm interested about solutions. And the solution is it seemed for myself, I kind of take it for granted because I spend a lot of time with just me, and have for a long time. But some of this stuff just seems really simple to me, because I guess reason why is I got a broader perspective of what this construct is. And I know that your signature is unique like a snowflake. And so when you truly express yourself authentically, what you do is that signature goes off. And it's like anything else, okay, there it is. There it is. It's sort of things if one is to paint a picture, it's like parts of you light up. Then it's able to be reassembled. And that's what the sphere of Amante is. It takes that and it helps facilitate it to be reintegrated back to you again. And again, to emphasize, that makes complete sense in context. There's a lot of reasons for being here, but for those who've been here for a long time, and that's really the origin of them being here, is coming through that catastrophic event and reassembling oneself.
Yeah. Yes.
There's a lot more to it, but that's really the simplest way that I like to look at it. If I start going down a rabbit hole too much, I start getting overwhelmed and I start short circuiting. So I don't like doing that. But that's what I think that's really the whole point of what we're talking about as far as reintegration, quanta, yada, 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 everything associated with that. Well, what's the solution? What's the bottom line? So, okay, bottom line, what is my signature? And how is my signature identified? Because outside of this, beings can simply identify me quickly because I have a signature, you have a signature. It's unique. There is no other like it. So that makes it easy to be able to keep track of it. So the reason for the sphere of Amante is be placed within the core of the Earth. Okay, I think it's still there, as far as I know. I mean, there's things were moved around and stuff because there was a lot of welcome to Grand Central Station, where there's all kinds of agendas, and there's been a lot of disruptive activity. Let's just say that a lot of going on. Okay, so looking to destroy things, take things away, blah 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 blah, and all this type of thing. A lot of skirmishes and battles and death. Blood and sweat and beers, whatever. Point is, it's been something else. So I don't know if it's still there, but the idea is to be in the core. So what's the core of the Earth? What's the core of the Earth? The core of the Earth on a circuit. Since I'm talking about the idea of circuit, what's that? It's the core of the Earth that's really the heart of the Earth in regard to what our connection would be with 12-dimensional blueprint pattern energy. Okay, which would allow reassemblage. So that's why it sits there in the core of the Earth, because it connects directly to 12-dimensional consciousness. And so that's, like when you do the Maharic Seal as an example, that's where the Maharic shield for the Earth forms. Okay. So anyhow, that's another subject. I don't want to get on to this. So we've kind of talked too much. At least I have, long enough, put it that way. So
we've sort of
leave it for another time, I suppose.
Yeah, I think we've covered the main I think that's really what I was
Yeah,
after.
we can, like, next time we can talk, maybe if you want to. I'm going to leave this up to you, of course, whatever you want to do. But I thought, like we talked about before, maybe doing this like in two parts, and talk a little bit more about the drama, which I don't really care to do too much of, but it wouldn't hurt to talk a little bit about that. And then maybe go on to the second part of the question or second question or something related to, because it would help facilitate the initial question about 25,500 BC. What happened before that led up to what occurred here with this.
Yes.
So there was things that were there was lots of goings on prior to that. So there's been a lot of drama within this universal construct high up, as I mentioned earlier.
Yeah, very high.
And it's just so much drama, man. It's just way too much, more than, be honest with you, if I could access it right now, I wouldn't want to. You know what I mean? If I could go out of the body and access all that, I can tell you this much: if I did and was able to be able to access it and retain it, which I probably would, anybody can when they get out of the body, if they're conditioned long enough to be able to do that. But let's just say I probably wouldn't want to bring very much of it back. It's like, especially here, I don't want to deal with anything more than I have to here. It's just way too hard. At least it has been for me. Give it enough time and it'll be that way for everybody. Trust me, it doesn't get any better until it does, if that makes any sense.
Well, maybe we should leave it at that for now then. I think we've covered that main topic pretty comprehensively, and there's lots of little items and gullies that come off the sides of it as well that maybe we can return to next time.
Yeah. Like I said, we can follow up on the drama in regard to answering the question what took place before that, which initiated what we are talking about in regard to the Neurubian dialectic crystal grid. While that's there, 7-layer frequency fence and all this other stuff, which here's the I'd like to close with this if I can. We're talking about this cube technology, okay? Yeah. Now, for me, the way I understand it and the way I'm able to relay it in the video that I did prior to this, or prior to the one before, or before the last one that I did, I'm basing it off on how I'm able to communicate it. It's a technology that's way beyond anybody here, and there's certain, no, I forgot to do something. I was going to show those pictures of scalar mapping. We can use that for next time.
You use it next time.
Yeah, but it goes into how this stuff is done, but how it's actually really being done. I mean, to understand it enough for me to be able to communicate it and try to hopefully in some cases simplify it as much as possible. I'm not all that bright, but the point is that this is like 100 million years advanced from what we have here. And there is some within the black operations and so on and so forth using pretty high technology, but we're talking about manipulating a whole reality field, so that's pretty advanced, I would say, right? So it's hard to communicate those ideas. For most people, they listen to you and you think it's woo, it sounds crazy to them. So, not that it should sound crazy to them, but it just does. I know the world I'm in. I just do what I can to be able to communicate it. And I try not to think too much of it after I say it, because I know what it sounds like. But somebody's got to do it.
No, it's an excellent introduction to the topic in particular, to give it that historical sort of background and focus on a little bit of the technological aspects of it as well. So I think following on from this, if we get into the actual drama, the carry-on that's caused some of that into our most recent history, that'll be an excellent next session, excellent adjunct.
Well, okay, I appreciate. I'm kind of tired, if you can't tell by now, but I really appreciate you, Michael. That's what I was trying to say.
Thank you.
I really glad that you showed up, and your assistance and just being there, and you're a gentleman. And you're a very intelligent individual, and I really appreciate you encouraging me, and you have encouraged me. So I'm thankful for that. And I would like to just do a shout out to everybody that may be listening and listen to the end here. Daphne, Deborah, Paul, and a handful of people that I do know and had been in my life for a while. Um, um, I just want to thank all of you. Everybody on Patreon and everything. I'm doing this for what I've been doing, just to try to be the person that I potentially can be. That's what I've been doing, and trying to do all that I know to do and help as much as I possibly can. And I can't do any more than what I have been, and I can't really do that much than what I have been doing without further assistance, and that's the truth. So we're all into this. We're all in this together. So let us try to be available to one another.
Here, here.
So, thank you, Michael. Thanks, folks. We'll see you next time.
Okay. Ciao. You stopped recording now, Randy?